with Chris Wallace on Sunday. Stephen Roberts, ABC News political analyst. What do you make of Rex Tillerson sort of distancing himself from the president there on Fox Sunday?
Well, of course, he's not the only major figure in the administration to do this. You had Gary Cohn, the chief economic advisor, in an interview with the Financial Times, was even more critical of President Trump's handling of the Charlottesville tragedy. And on Capitol Hill, you had a number of strong voices denouncing the president's decision to pardon Sheriff Joe Arpaio in Arizona. You had your own, you had Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, saying, I disagree with this decision. Other Republicans saying, at the core of conservative Republican principles is respect for the rule of law. And here, Joe Arpaio was someone who was a law enforcement officer who was charged with criminal contempt and convicted of criminal contempt for defying a federal judge. And so how does that square with Republican principles? This morning, the Wall Street Journal had a very scathing editorial saying, this showed Trump's disdain for the law, McGraw. So there are a lot of Republicans, like Tillerson, like Speaker Ryan, saying, I've got to separate myself from some of these ideas, or I'm going to be tarred with them myself.
Also throw in former Senator Jack Danforth, had that op-ed piece in the Washington Post on Friday.
Jack Danforth, who was an old friend of mine, an old source of mine, I covered him for many years on Capitol Hill, always respected him as a very sober and fair-minded legislator, and he used the word in that piece, he referred to the president as this hateful man. Look, Republicans are really torn. We've talked about this before. You have, on one hand, a lot of Republican voters who still support President Trump. So any Republican who defies the president, and particularly one in office like Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona, his reelection could be endangered if Trump supporters abandon him. And Republicans on Capitol Hill need the president. They need him to push their legislative agenda, whether it's health care reform or taxes or raising the national debt ceiling. They need him to sign the legislation that they want to put into effect. They have a golden moment here. For the first time in many, many years, Republicans have controlled the House, the Senate, and the White House. So they have a vested interest in the president's success, and they have a vested interest in cooperating with him to pass the legislative agenda. But what you're seeing, McGraw, is a growing number of Republicans deeply alarmed, not just at the policies of this administration, McGraw. That's not the real issue. The real issue is the word that was used by Senator Corker of Tennessee the other day, a Republican, in which he said he questioned the stability of the president. And what he was saying was, can we trust this man's judgment? Can we trust him to keep this country safe? Can we trust him to make the right decisions under pressure? That's the real issue that is concerning Rex Tillerson, Speaker Ryan, and a lot of other Republicans.
Let's talk about the Trump supporters, because they are, and it's too simple to say Donald Trump can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and they'll still support him. But it seems like they're fans of the president, and no matter what he does, even if he doesn't deliver on anything he said he was going to do, these people are going to support him and find justification for everything he does, even if it's against whatever they voted for him to do in the first place.
Well, so far, I think that's largely true, but you're starting to see cracks in that. A very good piece, and Kristen Solis Anderson, a very good Republican pollster, wrote a piece in Washington Examiner the other day, McGraw, in which she said, look, even though Trump's favorable ratings are around 35, 37, the real hardcore support for President Trump is about a quarter of the country. You look at a question, for instance, we asked at ABC News, and the question was, do you think President Trump is presidential? Only 24% said yes. And there's a whole series of questions in which really the hardcore support is 25%. The pardoning of Joe Arpaio was clearly aimed at that group, and they were clearly thrilled because Arpaio, a very hardline opponent of immigration, this is a core issue for the Trump base. But can you govern the country with only a quarter to at most a third of the public feeling favorable and feeling confident in your leadership? The answer is clearly No, you cannot govern the country with a base somewhere between a quarter and a third of the electorate. And this is one of the things that alarms so many Republican strategists. They say that Trump continues to have a mindset of campaigning where if you energize your base and you get your voters out, you can win primaries with a minority of the vote. But you can't govern the country with a minority. And that's the distinction, and that's the transition that a lot of Republicans feel he has not accomplished from being a candidate to being a president.
Stephen Roberts, ABC News political analyst. Always a pleasure to hear your voice. Have a good day. Thanks for checking in.
Okay, pal.
7:57.